When I step onto the stage in a faraway land with an orchestra I have never met, who doesn't speak English or Spanish, I enter fearlessly. I'm confident that we have at least two languages in common. First, of course, is music. My life mantra is that music unites, and I know that wherever we come from, be us paupers or kings, from the north or the south, no matter the color of our skin, our faith or native tongue, we will strive towards common goals and make beautiful and transcendent music together. The second language we have in common is body language, or what we refer to as nonverbal communication. I know the orchestra and I won't be building the Tower of Babel. I am confident that no matter what the obvious language or culture barriers, the musicians and I will share an intimate dialogue on a stage together. Within the orchestra, musicians exchange all kinds of nonverbal cues and signals, passing each other's crucial information to play, breathe, and phrase together. At the same time, with a wink, a nod, a snap of the baton, and a sweeping hand, the conductor will send a very clear message to the entire orchestra, uniting the individual musicians' voices in collective harmony. I don't say this out of arrogance, but instead out of experience. I know that human beings in general, and musicians in particular, have a very keen sense of communication that transcends the limits of verbal speech. I have experienced this elevated sense of awareness since I was a young child, and I see it in every accomplished musician I have ever encountered. At the same time, there are very learned scholars who know more about music history and can reproduce entire compositions from memory, but without the ability to physically convey the content of the music, even the most prodigious scholars can fall short. The magic ingredient is the ability to at once read others and to convey one's own deepest thoughts, all without words. I have been asked if this is something I learned or something I discovered naturally. To me, the intuitive aspect of nonverbal communication comes from my duende. While duende is a Spanish term, many cultures have them. They are otherwise known as goblins, pixies, elves, or leprechauns. They are little creatures that attach themselves to an individual and perform small feats of magic and present special gifts and powers to their host. Federico Garcia Lorca first developed the concept of duende, who helps artists create and communicate memorable, spine-chilling art. The offerings of the duende can be enhanced, refined, and improved, but only if they exist in the first place. It is like athletic talent or the ability to play an instrument. The muscles and reflexes must be trained. If you don't develop the natural talent, one will never reach one's full potential. My duende gave me the power to listen without words and speak without language, to receive information and express information, input and output like an electric current, incredibly quick. Without that bit of magic and generosity, it is unlikely I will be here before you this evening. So, when I say my prayers, I always include my duende who has shared this special gift. I have also learned that while all cultures express themselves non-verbally, some use it to greater extent than others. There are academic studies that recognize that the indigenous people of the Americas actually use these skills of awareness and physical reflex more effectively than most other people. So clearly, I have my ancestors to thank for my duende that sits in my shoulder and lets me communicate without words. The nonverbal skills of the indigenous people of the Americas were considered extremely well-honed, sophisticated. Not surprisingly, many of these skills crucial to the successful conducting were highly valued in these cultures. Let me point out some of them. First is a respect for personal differences. In today's society, differences often result in polarization. In native people, they were based on mutual respect. They thought that staying out of others' affairs was valued as were keeping their opinion to themselves. Clearly, this was well before Facebook and Twitter came along. This is so crucial in an orchestra, where we have people from all walks of life. Silence was valued. Many misread silence for indifference, yet nothing could be further from the truth. In their culture, it was a deeply embedded form of personal etiquette. Listening was equally valuable to talking. I love when my musicians listen. In Native American life, the virtue of patience was based on the belief that all things unfold on time. Music is like that. One must immerse oneself until it clicks in your head, and there is a deeper, more profound understanding of the message that goes far beyond the notes on the page. In these cultures, work was not held to a rigid schedule, but instead there was an ethic that it is always direct to a distinct purpose and gets done when it needs to be done. Let's be honest, orchestras run on schedules, but the purposeful aspects of this lesson are not lost on me or the musicians I work with. We never forget our higher purpose, and we do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, except when the union rules dictate otherwise. Yeah, right. It's always coming, you know. I always watch my watch, and it's like 1 minute before, and I'm like shaking all the time, waiting for my dear Jeff to come and say, Maestro. Well, but that is part of the rules. Mutualism permeated every aspect of their lives. The question was always, what is the greater good? That is so crucial in music. Unlike the contemporary American ideal of competition, cohesiveness must reign. But I always confess, sometimes as the conductor, I have to let mutualism fall by the wayside and create the result I desire. But even at these moments, I recognize that I'm nothing without my musicians. Waving a baton without an orchestra is an exercise in futility. Communication, both verbal and nonverbal, was encouraged only if it was purposeful. Small talk, chit-chat, gossip, these things were distractions and discouraged. It teaches both intent and sparsity of communication, both crucial to the work I do and the results I seek from my players. Observation and demonstration, as opposed to lecturing, was the preferred teaching method. And when talk is required, it is usually in the form of storytelling and metaphors. This can be most productive in the orchestral setting. I already mentioned that the cultures believe that things would happen in their own time. Related to this is an orientation to the present. It is so far too easy to live in the past or worry about the future. But this was viewed as distracting and non-productive. As musicians, we deal with the task at hand and let go of what happened before or what might happen in the future. As my mentor, Maestro José Antonio Abreu says, time is in the air. You just have to grab it and bring it to the music. The orientation of these people was holistic, which is the perfect metaphor for an orchestra. It is not the piccolo or the violin or the French horn. It is the gestalt of the whole that must be paramount in every player's mind. Finally, and maybe the most important of these values, is spirituality. To all conductors, music is holy, and Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, Adams are God, because they bring enthusiasm to their souls. As we know, the Greek word enthusiasm means to have the gods inside of you. This is not a job, it is a calling. Music is as important as air, water, and food to me. If it is not, then perhaps you are in the wrong profession. A lot of things in my life became clearer to me when I realized I was genetically predisposed to the work I do. Perhaps at the time I didn't always understand my calling or my skills that led me to this place in my life. But looking back, it makes a lot more sense to me, knowing that these things were in my blood, embedded in my DNA. So, how does this play out in my professional life? Well, during rehearsal, I certainly have my non-verbal tools, but I can also speak to the orchestra to articulate my musical wishes. And this is very important in the initial phases to provide context for our shared interpretation. Once the concert begins, however, I can only rely on the precision of my physical gestures in leading the orchestra and the power to instantaneously respond to the nonverbal information being exchanged by the musicians in order to achieve our common goal. You would think conducting a piece of music is very rote. The notes are on the page and the musicians play them. But that is far from the reality. It's more like a soccer game. I'm the coach and I have a plan and a strategy. But like a soccer game, every match has its own organic ebb and flow. Things change and adjustments must be made continuously. It is much more exciting and dynamic than most people imagine. If I didn't have my nonverbal skills, without the ability to respond to the unique demands of the movement, with clarity and assurance, more often than not, the musical results would be disastrous. While there are some central elements or a lexicon of gestures common to all conductors. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4. This means 4. 1, 2, 3. Like a valse, this means 3. This means forte. This means soft. This short, this long, whatever. Each develops his or her own method. Indeed, his own choreography of conducting that represents the specific dynamic of the piece being played. the experience and tradition of the orchestra being conducted, the unique acoustic or atmospheric demand of the moment, and an expression of personal style. As a young man learning conducting, Maestro Abreu took me to ballet rehearsals to study and would ask, can you see the tempi in the body? Can you see the harmony in the arms? Can you see the phrasing in the complete body? I have studied many other conductors in person and on film, and I'm awed that the range of stylistic possibilities. The legendary Herbert von Karajan, for example, developed a technique of conducting with his eyes closed. Communication with his orchestra, therefore, was not only non-verbal, but also essentially non-visual. He felt that by shutting his optical sense, it helped hide his ability to hear and respond to the audible subtleties around him. It probably also meant to the musicians in performance experience the greater need to exchange greater non-verbal information between each other to compensate for the conductor literally driving blind. Meanwhile, the lower half of Karajan's body hardly moved, while his arms and hands did all the work with great elegance and economy. This is often attributed to the aggressive regimen of yoga and meditation that were an integral part of Karajan's musical and mental preparation. It was a very personal approach, in many ways inimitable and unique to its time, but obviously enormously successful, as shown by Karajan's enduring status as a global musical icon. On the other hand, we have Leonard Bernstein, who, like his hero, Gustav Mahler, was known for his exuberant gestures. Whereas Karajan was all about control, with Bernstein you saw energy, joy, passion, and sometimes even an earthquake. Yet Bernstein knew exactly what he was doing, and occasionally he would reduce his dramatic gesture to the tiniest of inflection, letting minor facial expressions and nuances do all the musical talking. This moment, when Bernstein was at his least flamboyant, were some of his most shocking, as his deliberate defiance of expectation intensifies the sense of dramatic suspense. As Bernstein himself described it, the conductor must not only make his orchestra play, he must make them want to play. He must exalt them, lift them, start their adrenaline pouring, either by pleading or demanding or raging. It doesn't matter. It is not so much imposing his will on them like a dictator. It is more like projecting his feelings around them. It doesn't really matter how well you move with your hands. It should be in your face. It should be in your expression. Another example would be my late great friend and mentor, Claudio Abbado, who had the most eloquent hands of any conductor, but who understood his purpose as not to draw attention to himself, but to encourage the musicians of the orchestra to listen and respond to each other as if playing chamber music. This too was a very individual approach. Carlos Kleiber also comes to mind. His exhaustive preparation and legendary perfectionism was prelude to a non-verbal style which was cunningly effective and elegantly restrained, yet always charged with a kind of ferocious energy. I think masters like Karajan and Bernstein, in their individual ways, always have strategies worked out ahead of time. Not only their musical conceptions, but also the physical expressions of their intentions were calculated for greatest theatrical effect. In that sense, I feel closer to Kleiber, preferring to let the piece and the moment dictate my movements, and to use the energy of the moment to unlock more possibilities and expressive tools. When I conduct, my goal is not a technical one. Getting all the notes right is the job of the players in front of me. My challenge is an emotional one, to see that the musicians are playing harmoniously with each other, that the interpretation is coherent, and that what we are collectively trying to express is reaching the audience and moving them. People come to a concert not just to listen, but to allow the music to take them on a journey. On the podium, I feel like I'm their guide, using all my nonverbal means to convey and reveal this wondrous path of discovery we can walk together. When I was much younger, conducting was all about how. How I'm going to do this, how will the orchestra respond, how will it sound? After more than a quarter of a century of conducting, the question that enters my mind before I perform a new piece is why? Why I'm doing this piece? Why I'm approaching this piece in this way? Why will the audience engage? It goes back to the spirituality and the godlessness of music. Audiences in Los Angeles have more access to the visual aspects of conducting than in most venues. At Walt Disney Concert Hall, there are some seats that actually face me, and the orchestra has their backs to the audience. And at the Hollywood Bowl, my conducting is projected on huge screens for all to see. This is not typical and offers special insight to our audience, who have proven themselves to be among the most sophisticated in the world. But let me be clear. The non-verbal communications we are discussing are for the orchestra. They are not done to entertain the audiences, although I certainly recognize that they might have that additional effect. In the end, it is not about my posture, it is not about my gestures, it is simply what we are expressing in that moment. That is the essence. Next time you are at a concert, I invite you to close your eyes, even if just for a moment, and just listen to the honesty, the composer, and the music. When I step onto the stage, no matter where in the world I am, no matter what else is going on in my life, I am my happiest. Because I always know that something extraordinary is about to happen. That sense of joy and anticipation is what I want audiences to feel. And the only tools I have are my movements and my music and my duende to take them there. Thank you.